Hey guys, it's churches, graveyards and graves, and we are at St Wiston in Repton. So I've already done one video of the inside of the church, but I can't come here. I just can't come to St Wiston's in Repton without showing you this grave. So it's one of the few graves which mentions a murder. Now there's been a couple. I think I did another in Hinckley where someone was murdered, and there's been a couple. There was one of a drummer boy where he got murdered, but this one, the perpetrator never seemed to get caught, and this grave just describes it, what happened, and it's also got some of the symbolism on it. So without further ado, let us see the murder of Samuel Marshall. Here we go. So firstly, I just want to show you the top of the grave. So here we have this hammer, and we have this branch cut. So this is really telling you that in the prime of life, so this tree here is like life, the life-giving tree, and in the prime of life they were dreadfully cut off by some sort of event. Now if you look as well, there's not just a hammer, there's a knife. So I don't know if you can see that across there because the light's on it a bit funny, but the light is on there and it's showing you a knife and a hammer and this branch cut away. And we're going to go down now and see what it says. So it says its own story really. In memory of Samuel Marshall Baker, aged 21, who unfortunately fell a victim to a barbarous affliction on the 4th of February 1786. So it's 18th century, and I'll try and read exactly what happened here. So it says, by murderer's hand my thread of life was broke, dreadful the hour and terrible the stroke. Repent thou wicked spoiler of my youth, behold me here, confider, parents both. See from thy bloody hand what was, arise, while cause for vengeance pierce the lofty skies. Thou too must suffer the thou escape the, I can't read that, for God is just and will avenge my cause. So what a wonderful epitaph that is. So you've got this guy Samuel Marshall, and he's a victim to a barbarous affliction on the 4th of February 1786, and it talks about God being his vengeance. It says, see from thy bloody hand what was, arise, while cause for vengeance pierce the lofty skies. Well, you can't get more interesting than that, can you? Wow. So we know that someone went away with a bloody hand and attacked Samuel, who was only 21, and he fell victim to this barbarous act, basically. And it's just a wonderful example of an 18th century grave where actually there's not much else mentioned about Samuel really, other than this terrible act. And in some ways it's an incredibly sad story. So now I brought you to another grave at St Wiston's in Repton. Much newer and nowhere near as nasty as the last one we saw of poor Samuel. But anybody who's into sport might remember this person. I'll be honest, I'm being honest here, right? I'm not into cricket. But we here have the grave of C.B. Fry. So he was born in 1872 and died in 1956. And he's from Repton and he's buried right here, and he was a bit of a famous cricketer back in the 1950s here. So if you're into cricket, you might know of C.B. Fry. So I'm going to show you his grave, because why not? So here we go. So you can see this is a much more modern grave, and you've got 1872, which was obviously his birth. Then his name, C.B. Fry, 1956, so that's his death. and all it says about him is nothing like the other one where it goes into a massive story. It says cricketer, scholar, athlete and author, the ultimate all-rounder. So he wasn't just a cricketer, he was a scholar, he was an athlete, and he was also an author. And here he is at the back of the church, buried in Repton. So he's on the north side, which is a bit weird, but here he is, because a lot of the more modern graves were on the north side, to be honest. And here we are at the back, so I'm just going to show you now, just come around a little bit, so the sun's in the way a little bit, and just going to show you the back of this church, and you can actually just see one of the old buildings of the school over there as well. I've just brought you round to the back of Repton Church now, and there's this fine selection of war graves here. So these are obviously Commonwealth war graves, and to be honest, most of them are glider pilots or from the Royal Air Force or something to do with the Royal Air Force. So quite close to here was an Air Force base or an Air Force training base. So here you've got Royal Air Force 41, so these are World War II. You've got a glider pilot regiment of the Army Air Corps, another glider pilot. So a lot of these were in the RAF at some point. And this one's a massive one, but it's a beautiful grave, they're like a tomb grave. So obviously these were the most important of the war heroes. So you've got this wonderful badge of the RAF on top, and it says here, Godfrey Harry Grantham of Hamlet, Abingdon, Berkshire, instructor pilot officer, RAF, youngest son of the late Captain Frederick William Grantham and his widow Alexandra, born 1911, killed in active service in 1942. So you've got this wonderful grave. So obviously he was like the son of a captain as well, and you've got like a badge down here, and as we go around we've got some more details about him. So an able officer, a gifted artist, a perfect son, a loyal and stimulating friend, indefatigable in living his great ideals, understanding and compassion. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Now, weirdly enough, it's starting to erode and sink a bit, and you know, so it's surprisingly more difficult to read, but you've got a bit of scripture there as well. So obviously there's a little plaque of this person, and so that's a stunning grave as well. And here we have some of the other Commonwealth war graves. Again, most of them are pilots. You've got a Royal Engineer over there, you've got a Lincolnshire regiment here, and also you have one, and they've put a lovely flag there, which is nice, of the Royal New Zealand Air Force. So now I brought you to another grave. So there's so many in Repton, but this one explains somebody's profession. So we've had a murder, we've had war graves, we've had a cricketer and scholar, and now we have a physician. And we're gonna this one is going to tell us the story of this guy's profession. So this is Charles Watkins, and he died in the 28th of August 1809, and he was 62 years old. But it's what is said on here. So here we go. So we're going to read this out because, again, it's just an amazing story about what he practiced. So it says here, he practiced surgery and pharmacy in this village and neighbourhood more than 40 years with honour and credit to himself, and with satisfaction to all that employed him. He dispensed with a liberal hand his advice and his medicines, gratuitously to the indignant poor, who feel in his death a loss irreplaceable. He lived admired as a scholar and a gentleman. He died generally beloved by his widow and his children, deeply and poignantly regretted. In the same vault lie the remains of his daughter Mary, who died on the 23rd of March 1800, aged 24. Also near to the same vault lie the remains of his son Walter, who died on the 17th of May 1795, aged 22. So here we have Charles, who was a surgeon, and it tells you a bit about him as a person. He was a scholar, he was a gentleman. I like the way it says here, he died generally beloved. I don't know whether that means that he wasn't always beloved by his widow and his children. And he also, you know, he suffered great tragedy with the death of both his daughter and his son, in you know, relatively young, as 24 and 22. But what a great epitaph to this man, and just describing his profession as well, in that he did give his skills as well to the poor. And you've got to remember, guys, for those of you that don't know, there was no NHS at this time. So if you were poor, you didn't get free health service, you know, you couldn't really afford help. So you've got to understand that he obviously gave his help as much as he could to the poor without payment. So here we have the tower now of St Wistons in Repton. So you can see that that's a little bit later. It's been built a little bit later. And then you've got this clock, which is quite hideous, really. It's like been painted on the side of it, which is really not in keeping with the rest of the church. But I don't know when that was added, but probably the 19th century. But, you know, it really, really stands out in this area. And it's a massive graveyard, and there's just some amazing characters in here as well. So as we walk round, you can see how it's changed, and you've even got this wonderful tomb grave, which probably is incredibly old as well. But of course now it's all worn away, so no idea of when it was produced or how old it is. So I hope you've enjoyed those stories from the graves. You've got the murder, the cricketer and the physician. 3 amazing stories about 3 you know, amazing people, and also the RAF captain who died in action, you know, wherever that was, in active service, flying somewhere for us, you know, for England and all that. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing these stories. But just remember that every grave has a story. You know, every name on a grave has a story. And a few people have asked me, or put in the comments, well, you know, it's only the wealthy. And that is true. So when we're looking at a lot of these graves, there'll be many people buried here in this graveyard that you know, are nameless. They haven't even got a stone. They certainly won't have been mentioned as a physician or a pilot or even as somebody who was murdered. Certainly most of the older graves will be of the wealthier people. So they would have either been merchants, and obviously the bigger the grave, the more likely they were to be of means. And certainly when you went inside the church and saw the alabaster memorial, you would certainly only see the very wealthy. You know, any of those memorials in the church are always the most wealthy. So they'd be like the lairds, even the crypt really, that belonged to the kings of Mercia. So we're seeing a glimpse of history, but only one part of it. And it never includes the multitudes, the thousands of poor people that are on this sacred ground, or are on this hallowed ground, but are just basically buried here with no names and no memories. But, you know, when you go into a graveyard, just be aware of that fact, that there'll be many, many other people in these graveyards where there's not even a stone that mentions their name. So from churches, graveyards and graves, I hope you've enjoyed this little bit of history in this wonderful church, and like and share my videos, and hopefully I will see you again soon. So that's it. See you again soon, guys.